What's up everyone and welcome back to another video. So with the release of chapter 4 and a whole new year of competitive events coming up, a lot of people are wondering whether right now is the time to switch from controller to keyboard and mouse. So in today's video, what I'm going to be doing is discussing whether or not you should actually switch to keyboard and mouse in Fortnite chapter 4, as well as going over how you can actually improve fast if you do decide to switch. Before we get into it though, be sure to drop a like on this video if it helps you out, subscribe if you're new to the channel and want to see more, and if you want to show some extra support, it would really mean a lot to me if you could use code Teckoh in the item shop. It's 100% free for you. It seriously does help me out a ton, so thank you so much to everyone who uses it. And lastly guys, as you may or may not know, I actually do offer paid one-on-one coaching. My videos are always going to remain free, but if you want to directly get into a game with me and receive direct guidance to improve, then that might be a good option. Whether you're trying to improve on a new platform like switching to keyboard and mouse, I can help you out with that, or trying to level up faster in arena, or trying to get better mechanics or anything like that, one-on-one coaching could be a big help. So with that said, I'll put the coaching link in the description if you guys are interested in that, but without further ado, let's get into today's video. So getting into the first topic of this video, and one of the most important factors that leads people to switch to keyboard and mouse is flexibility. The fact of the matter is that on keyboard and mouse you have so much more flexibility in pretty much every area of your gameplay. For example, you have way more keys to choose from, you have a whole mouse pad instead of just one that'll stick to aim, and overall it's just a much more customized experience compared to controller. The only exception to this, which I can think of, is movement, since you do have 360-degree movement on controller, but at the same time you can literally just get a similar effect by using something like keys 2x on mouse and keyboard. Although it's not 360 degrees, it's still pretty good. It's still almost as good as controller. As well as that, you even have joystick attachments for keyboard and mouse that literally give you 360-degree movement, which is another example of this flexibility. One other factor which kind of falls under the flexibility category as well is scroll wheel reset. Having scroll wheel reset is such a major advantage on keyboard and mouse and gives you the ability to literally just reset builds instantly. So with that, you can easily trick out an opponent by making them shoot a wall, close edits instantly after taking a shot, and other things of that nature. You do have scroll wheel attachments for controller too, but the only problem with that is that most controller players already have their hands full with their controller, plus maybe even paddles, and as you would expect, that makes it way harder to use. Whereas with something like a joystick on keyboard, not only is it pretty comfortable to use, but it also opens up 4 different binds, being W, A, S, and D. So overall, the aspect of flexibility is definitely going to be in favor of keyboard and mouse. Another big factor when it comes to switching to keyboard and mouse is your aim. Now everyone's going to have their opinion on whether aim assist is fair because it compensates for a disadvantage, or if it should be removed because it's not actually skillful, or pretty much any other opinion. But the fact of the matter is that aim assist is real and it's pretty strong. I'd say that when it comes to aim, neither platform has an inherent advantage. Aim assist is totally real and it's definitely helpful, but at the same time there's a skill ceiling with aim assist, whereas with keyboard you're able to improve your aim well beyond what the average player with aim assist can do. So although your aim is probably going to take a hit for a while if you do switch to keyboard and mouse, I do think you can also significantly mitigate this by simply aim training on a consistent basis. It's going to take some serious work, but it can absolutely be done, and I personally think you can far surpass your controller aim if you really put the work in, but that's the problem, actually putting the work in. Moving on to our next factor, and we've got mechanics. Now when it comes to mechanics, the only problem facing keyboard and mouse is movement. As we discussed earlier, keyboard and mouse movement is much more limited than controller movement, since controller players can move in literally any direction while keyboard is stuck with only 8 directions. Those directions are north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. However, with the option of double movement binds and all sorts of things like that, I'd say it's still a slight disadvantage in terms of movement, but it's definitely not a massive problem like it would have been back in chapter 1 or 2. Regarding the 2 primary mechanics, which are building and editing, I would say that editing is on a relatively level playing field since both platforms have double edit binds as well as edit on release. I would say that the average keyboard and mouse editor is probably faster, but the average controller editor is probably more consistent. For building though, I do think keyboard and mouse definitely has to take the cake. Personally, I just think that having the ability to use side mouse buttons, all the keyboard buttons, and be able to directly start building instead of having to switch mode and then build, all makes it a very powerful platform in terms of building speed. So now we're going to get to the big question of today's video, which is, should you switch to keyboard and mouse? Well, let's take a look at the pros and cons of switching. For the pros, aka the benefits of switching, you've got flexibility with all the variety in settings and binds, a much higher skill ceiling, scroll wheel reset, and the potential for faster building. For the cons, you've obviously got the price, since you do have to buy a whole new mouse and keyboard, unless you already have one. You've also got the con of aim, mainly because it takes much more practice compared to controller with aim assist, and you lose your omnidirectional movement, aka 360-degree movement. So really, whether or not you should actually switch is going to depend on how you feel about those factors. If you want to increase your skill ceiling, you're willing to put in the time to train your aim and mechanics from square one, and you're willing to gut the price of buying a quality keyboard and mouse, then I would say to switch, especially if you're not already a solid competitive player on controller. If you're already pretty good on controller and you don't want to sacrifice your aim assist and 360-degree movement, then you may want to stay on controller just because that's where you play best. So really, it's going to depend on the person. So moving on to the last part of today's video, since we've already gone over whether or not you should actually switch, for those of you who are deciding to make the switch from controller to keyboard and mouse, I want to talk about how to actually improve if you switch, more specifically how you can build your skills back up as fast as possible. The first step in improving on keyboard and mouse is going to be be setting up optimal settings. Now, I don't want to go too in depth on settings in this video since that's not what the video is about, but if you do need to know which settings to use, then I would recommend you check out one of my keybinds videos where I go over multiple of the best sets of keybinds for keyboard and mouse, as well as one of my sensitivity videos where I discuss how to find your most optimal sensitivity. Having good settings is pretty much half the battle on its own when it comes to learning a new platform, since after that, the whole strategy is basically just going to revolve around constantly grinding your mechanics. If you do check out those videos though, I do think you're going to have a much easier time finding your perfect settings compared to many other players. It really helps when you're not stuck trying to find the best keybinds and settings and all that when you're trying to improve on a platform as well. So moving on from that, the first stage of actually improving is simply to grind out tons of mechanical practice. Primarily, I'm just going to recommend free building so you can learn the fundamentals. These are things like 90s, double edits, mongrel classics, and even things like tunnels and ramp rushes. Really, the goal here is to get the hang of your binds and get accustomed to how to reach each of them. This part might take a couple hours or even a few days, but it's super helpful to get your foundation built at the start rather than jumping straight into the game and just getting dumped on over and over. Onto the second stage though, and at this point you're going to want to continue doing the free building and stuff, and maybe even step it up to some higher level stuff like basic retakes and whatnot. But at the same time, you're going to want to start mixing in some 1v1s and other low pressure creative combat practice. Since you'll have your very basic mechanics down at this point, the next goal is to be able to apply them in real fights and just kind of make them flow. At this point, since you're not going to be very good at the game still, you're going to want to try and play against players who aren't necessarily bad at the game, but try to find people who aren't exactly competitive players and wouldn't be too much of a challenge on your old setup. It's okay if you're losing, but you don't want to be getting absolutely whacked every single round and just not stand a chance. The goal here is really to learn your new platform by immersion at this point, so you shouldn't be too focused on trying to play against insane players like I usually recommend when it comes to creative. Just take it slow, expose yourself to more and more difficult players while continuing to practice your regular techniques and stuff in creative. And finally guys, at a certain point, you're going to find yourself being at least reasonably competitive against most players in 1v1s. At this point, this is where I recommend you implement some of the more advanced creative maps I talk about in my videos, like Raiders Peace Control map, Tito's realistic edit map, and other maps like those. As well as that, I recommend reintroducing public matches in arena, starting to add in a lot more aim training, and overall just trading improvement like a regular player would. Overall though, by starting off with no pressure practice and then gradually getting into more difficult practice as you progress, you should find yourself being able to improve on a new platform very quickly. It may seem intimidating to switch, especially when you've been playing controller for months or even years, but switching to keyboard really is not too bad if you can follow this process and really just be patient with it. But with all that said guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on whether you should switch to keyboard and mouse in Fortnite Chapter 4, as well as how you can actually go about doing it if you do decide to switch. If you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate if you could drop a like and consider subscribing as well if you're new to the channel and you want to see more Fortnite tips and tricks videos just like this in the future. As well as that, consider using code Teckoh in the item shop as it's 100% free for you and it seriously does help me out a bunch. As always, a huge thank you to everyone who uses my code. You guys are awesome. And lastly guys, just one more quick reminder that if you're looking for one-on-one guidance to improve at the game, including if you need help switching to keyboard and mouse or anything of the sort, feel free to set up a coaching session, which you can do in the link in the description. But with that said, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.